God's Word. August 16th, we're reading in 1 Samuel 7 and 8, Romans 6, Jeremiah 44, and Psalm 20 and 21. We're going to spend our time in 1 Samuel, primarily chapter 7, but also a little bit in chapter 8. And it's here that Samuel, the prophet, begins to kind of judge and reign over Israel, if you will. So we see in verse 3, Samuel said to the house of Israel, if you are returning to the Lord with all your heart, put away the foreign gods and the Ashtoreth from among you. Direct your heart to the Lord and serve him only, and he will deliver you out of the hand of the Philistines. You say you're turning to the Lord. You say you want to follow him. All right. You got to have evidence of that. You got to be putting away those things that will trip you up, like these foreign gods. It's really what James talks about in James chapter 2. Right? You say you have faith. Well, where are your works? Show me your works and I'll see your faith, kind of thing. Right? If it's there, it's going to be evident. And so Samuel calls them to put away, reject those foreign gods, those foreign idols. And so verse 4, the people of Israel put away the Baals and the Ashtoreth, and they served the Lord only. Right? It's not into equal co-share, co-godship. Right? We devote our lives to him and him alone, Christ alone. So Samuel's going to pray to the Lord for them, but then the Philistines have come. Verse 7. The Philistines heard the people of Israel had gathered at Mizpah. The lords of the Philistines went up against Israel, and when the people of Israel heard of it, they were afraid of the Philistines. Now they've just had this time where they've confessed, they've repented, they've turned from. Samuel has prayed for them, and then first sign of trouble, what do? And the people of Israel said to Samuel, do not cease to cry out to the Lord our God for us, that he may save us from the hand of the Philistines. Keep praying, Samuel. And so Samuel does. He offers up a burnt offering. And then he does something interesting here. After the burnt offering, the Philistines come, but the Lord, he was fighting for them. So verse 12, Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shen and called his name Ebenezer. For he said, till now the Lord has helped us. Ebenezer is a stone of help. So the Philistines were subdued and did not again enter the territory of Israel, and the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines all the days of Samuel. A stone of remembrance. A stone of help. The stone didn't do anything, right? God did something. He put them into confusion and allowed the men of Israel to have the victory. The stone is there to remind the people of Israel. Why? Because Samuel knows, God knows, their faith will falter. Fear will rise. And if they're not reminded of the goodness of God, of his faithfulness in and for them, it's going to go bad. And so he sets up this stone which says, till now the Lord has helped us. Well, in chapter 8, Israel is kind of getting antsy because they're looking around to the world rather than looking up to the Lord. And therein lies the problem. And God's, of course, going to use this, and he's going to be helping Samuel walk them through this. But as we know from the history, there's very few good kings. And anytime you start to look and see what the world is doing and getting your cues from the world, at some point it's going to come back to bite you. At some point it's going to disappoint you. It's going to lead you down a path that is not healthy, it's not godly, it's not likely going to be pure. Don't take your cues from the world. Don't take your cues from, everyone else is. Take your cues from the Lord. 1 Samuel 8, verse 4, the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, behold, you're old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Appoint for us a king to judge us like the nations. But the thing displeased Samuel. And he said, when they said, give us a king. And Samuel prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, obey the voice of the people and all that they say to you. They have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them. according to all the deeds that they have done from the day I brought them up out of Egypt, even to this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are also doing to you. Now then, obey their voice. Only you shall solemnly warn them and show them the way of the kings who will reign over them. And so here's what Samuel does. God gives him the words to say. He says, there will be a king over you. He will take your sons. He will appoint them to your chariots, be his horsemen, and to run before his chariots. He will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, some to plow his ground, to reap his harvest, some to plow his ground, to make implements of war and the equipment of his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive orchards and give them to his servants. He will take the tenth of your grain of your vineyards and give to his officers and to his servants. He will take your male servants and your female servants and the best of your young men, your donkeys, and put them to work. He will take the tenth of your flock, and you shall be his slaves. And in that day you will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. Here's what's coming. Here's what it's going to look like when you get a king. But the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel. They said, no, there shall be a king over us. Why? Here it is, verse 20. That we may be like the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. When Samuel heard all the words of the people, he repeated them in the ears of the Lord. And the Lord said to Samuel, obey their voice. Make them a king. Samuel said to the men of Israel, go every man to his city. We want to be like everybody else, Samuel. I don't care what the consequences are. And God reminded Samuel that ever since he brought him up out of Egypt, they've served other gods, they've forsaken his ways, and so they're not rejecting your leadership, they're rejecting mine. And whenever we look to the world to give us our cues, we're rejecting not the authority God puts over us, in whatever form or fashion that may be, parent, boss, governmental leaders. We're rejecting God as king over our lives. Till next time, keep growing, little by little.